Welcome to edition 21 of Word magazine. Very excited to introduce Solly Malatsi, our current Minister of Communications and Digital Transformations. In an era that demands bold leadership and future-focused solutions, Solly Malatsi stands out as a voice of vision and purpose. From his roots in Limpopo to his influential role in Parliament, Malatsi's journey is grounded in service and the belief that every South African deserves equal access, especially to connectivity. In this conversation, he shares his hopes for a more connected nation, his path in politics, and why dreaming big is not just personal, it's a responsibility.
Solly Malatsi, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Your journey in politics began with the Democratic Alliance Young Leaders Program. Looking back, what inspired you to pursue public service and what keeps you motivated today?
That question always takes me back to my childhood because I think I was always politically conscious and acting without realizing it because public service take shape in different ways. I grew up in a rural village. From my doorstep to the next piece of a tar road still remains to this day approximately 5 kilometers. Even though in my household we grew up with, a borehole, there were households around us that didn't, who had to either walk, 3 kilometers to the community dam to get water there. And because I spent the first 6 years of my life, I had a contrast to what is right and what seems wrong. Because growing up in Soweto, our street was paved, right? There was every household on the street had water. And it just seems like this is not right. And my grandfather, who raised me up, always made sure that those families, for instance, who could not afford to have an old lady who has a grain in the household walking those 3 kilometers with a 20-liter bucket on their head fetching water. He always made them fetch water from our household. And we were always staying with relatives who, due to a variety of reasons, their family couldn't take, good care of them. And we always provided, for other people other than, our direct family. And in that way, I think that's where the seed of public service was planted, because it was always this notion that whatever little you have, share it with those around you, particularly those who don't have. And going to high school, I began being curious about history and the politics of our country. And my English teacher always fed me, the most, I think, important books at the time, like Steve Biko's I Write What I Like, Nelson Mandela's Long Road to Freedom. And those things, I think, cumulatively planted in me the desire to be in public service.
Okay, well, we're glad that you're here. And you've held several roles in Parliament, from spokesperson, positions to MP, and now Minister. What leadership lessons have defined your growth in this space?
Sure, there have been several. But I think the most important one has been to back, yourself. I think, the way the universe functions is that we find ourselves in spaces and responsibilities that we have earned. And sometimes the more you are elevated to those roles, either because of, external criticism, and sometimes the imposter syndrome that I think each and every individual goes through at one stage, you can start doubting yourself. And I think for me, the most valuable lesson has been, an appreciation that you get elevated to spaces that you have earned, and to constantly keep backing yourself. And in this regard, I think for me, it has been also having a close-knit circle around you that will hold you accountable to your own standards, because sometimes having big success can lead to either entitlement or complacency. And when those two happen, you start having the negative effects of influence distracting you from what you should be doing. And secondly, I think it's always important to try and have balance in life, because You need to be a better human being and in a better space to be the best version of the leader that you can be. And when you don't have that balance, you're going to have either one aspect of your life negatively impacting over your talents over a long period of time.
And how does Solly find balance?
Look, for me is, I enjoy a lot of sports, mostly football. That's where I find joy and just a release that is free from the demands of
You actually playing football?
No, I enjoy coaching it these days, and I enjoy coaching it and running, even though I don't run as much as I used to a year before.
Yeah.
But running for me provides me with the solitude where you just let your ideas wander into different themes of creativity, and in that process you find the most free brainstorming that you can imagine, and you then start filtering through your crazy ideas to your more substantial ones. And I think that's important. And having become a dad also, I find balance in just spending time with my family and playing with my son.
Very grounding. The little ones. They make you slow down.
It's equally humbling, of like, and I never thought this would happen, but friends of mine who have kids always said, you are most accountable to your kid, because, like, for instance, when my son wants his time, he doesn't care what I'm doing, and that becomes the most precious and important thing at a given time. And also giving the best version of, myself to him becomes important, because in this, especially for our generation, wherein we can be so results oriented, you often compromise precious moments with your family, because your family sees you, all they see is you being swallowed by work, right? And that's not fair on that. And especially for a young kid to grow up, see you weary, stressed, or tired. So it's always key to also make sure that you dedicate your best moods, your best energy and feelings towards them, because kids also need to build memories of their parents and themselves. And if all they see is the negative sides of it, so even the things that they grow up experiencing, they may develop a resentment to it, because they see this word taking away the best version of their dad away from them.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And when you were growing up, I mean, I'm sure you did sound whenever you're minister one day. What was on the list? Like,
Not even.
Yeah.
So growing up, there were different stages where one aspires for different things. I think, initially when I was in primary school, I was always fascinated by literature, and discovering new ideas. So I think at that stage, I may have been leaning towards, writing and, journalism without being consciously aware of it. I've always enjoyed reading. When I got to high school towards my matric, where you had to now figure out what you wanted to do. And I think in the mid-2000s, of being a chartered accountant was the buzzword at the time. And I thought I wanted to be one until I got to varsity and attended. So I got to varsity, registered for a BCom economics degree. And even though I had done very well in economics, it was accountancy that I struggled in. I remember attending 3 weeks of accountancy lectures, and I couldn't hear our lecturer. I couldn't hear her. And in the fourth week, I decided I'm going to switch degrees from BCom Economics to a Bachelor of Administration, majoring in Development Studies and Public Administration. And I kid you not, I remember going to the first lecture of our Public Administration class, and they were speaking about, I think the session was about institutions supporting our constitutional democracy, which Chapter 9 institutions like the Public Protector, Auditor General. And it just felt like I belonged in there, And I remember leaving that class thinking, shit, this was my life. I'm very sorry about that. That didn't feel like I was in a class,
Okay.
And it was then that I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in public administration, but always envisioned that I would be in the background. I think my aspirations at the time had switched to just wanting to be a speechwriter and work behind the scenes to help politicians with saying the right things and having the right ideas, and that was it. So it was until 2013, after having worked as a researcher for the DA, having been a spokesperson for the NEC of Transport here in the Western Cape, and be a spokesperson for the mayor of Cape Town, that I felt like those three experiences, in a way, pulled me from the background into the forefront of saying, I've done my stint with helping politicians become better, and I'd seen what is required to be an effective leader. And I thought it was the time for me to come to the front, because you can't hide behind other people all the time. And it was my turn.
Your turn to share. Yeah. All right. So Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. And you're overseeing some amazing transformation that's happening in the country. What do you see as the long-term vision for South Africa's digital future?
For me, the most pressing one that will shape our country's future, if we can get South Africa as close as possible to 100% internet connectivity, that will be life-changing.
What is currently?
It currently at just over 75%. So we've got 1/3 of our population that has no access whatsoever to internet connectivity. And that for me is a matter of, social as much as it's a matter of economic justice. Because it means that in those communities, and I interface with that a lot, because I come from a village and I still live there for the largest part of my life. Is I've seen the transformational power of what connectivity does to communities, either for young entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses online, or even as something as simple as empowering kids from those rural communities to be able to access learning material online that then empowers them to compete with their peers at an equal foot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question here about the proposed equity equivalent investment program. How do we strike the balance between embracing global tech innovation and ensuring meaningful local empowerment?
Look, I think it's important, and to just take a step back, go to the previous question. We have over 23 million South Africans who don't enjoy any form of internet connectivity. For those 23 million plus people, it means that the boundless opportunities that exist in the digital world are a foreign concept to them. And that is not right. So what do we have to look at? We have to look at various possibilities within our current laws that will allow us to make sure that those individuals are brought into the fold, for them to be active participants in the digital economy, right? So South Africa's current empowerment rules make for two ways in which an international company can enter South Africa to invest in. You could either sell 30% of your shares to a local entity, or you can enter it through the avenue of equity equivalent programs, which means that spending a certain percentage of your monies on research and development, doing business with local suppliers, creating jobs, investing in infrastructure, and also looking at initiatives like, investing in skills and development, like funding bursaries, learnerships, and those type of skills empowerment programs. We have a very unique situation wherein in the ICT sector, for instance, the equity equivalent programs, which, by the way, contrary to what other people are trying to portray, are an empowerment tool on their own, because what they do, instead of giving a very small group of people 30% local ownership, the benefit is much wider, right? Because it flows into communities and into different groups of people. Is that in the ICT sector, it is only in the telecommunication space where it only relates to the issuing of licenses to telecommunication companies that the equity equivalent programs are not applicable. And we are saying, and what I proposed is that we need to look at why that is the case and look at making sure that we can extend that throughout the sector, because these are not new introductions, right? In the mining sector, for instance, equity equivalent programs are applicable. Even in the automobile sector, that is why you have a BMW currently operating in South Africa and it doesn't have 30% brown color emission.
Why do you think that is? Why?
Because we've got a choice, right? And we're saying that those two choices should be applicable to Lisa International if you want to invest in the IC sector in South Africa. And why do you have one aspect of the sector, having some exceptional practices applicable to it only? And the most important thing for me is to make sure that the same rules apply to the same players throughout the industry. Yeah.
And how far are you in achieving that, would you?
So we're at the very beginning stages of it, because we've issued a policy directive for public comment, which means that now, up until the 2nd of July, every South African who has a view on the potential role of equity equivalent programs in the ICT sector can submit their views. And those views, because we are a democratic country that is anchored around participatory democracy, we must consider them in the final formulation of the policy directive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. As you mentioned, for many South African youth, and more than just youth, access to tech and skill remains out of reach. How can the government and the private sector partnerships change that? Would you say you've answered that, or is there more that we can do?
No, so I think we need far more stronger collaboration between the private sector and the government, also including working together with non-governmental organizations that are present in communities. And to this end, it's quite inspiring to see some of the work that is happening already, particularly towards digital skills and empowering young people with digital skills that they need to at least have a stronger chance of getting employment, for instance. The department is working together with Digital Council and the private sector towards all these problems. And most also interestingly, over and above young persons, even in capacitating civil servants with digital skills is a very important thing, right? So I think what then becomes important in doing so is to also look at it from a very foundational base, that even our education system is to start incorporating programs of curricula that teaches learners from an early age digital skills. But in order to do that, you need infrastructure, and that infrastructure needs to be closer to people. And that is why the department, through our entities such as the State Information Technology Agency and NEMISA, which is our Institute for Skills and Media Development, we are building cyber labs in schools, particularly in rural townships and informal settlements, because it is masters and children in those areas who don't have the digital tools that they need. And that becomes important because we know that the digital skills that are needed to compete in this economy gives anyone, mostly young people, an advantage when you have that, to stand a stronger chance to be employed, to stand a stronger chance to start your own business, or to stand a stronger chance to even make meaningful and productive use of the internet. One of the states that unsettled me a lot is that over 50% of internet usage in South Africa is mostly for social media purposes. So that is not, in my view, the productive use of the internet, because you want to be able to steer that towards economic outputs. You want to be able to steer that towards entrepreneurial initiatives, to steer that towards learning outcomes, which will be things that you can see are helping make and improve people's lives or better.
In the interim, while you are trying to get that into the systems, the school systems, what advice would you give to a young South African who wants to lead in tech and media or even politics, but feels that there are systemic barriers to where they want to go?
Look, to be bold. And bold by mean that knock at every door that is closest to you, and don't stop being creative and innovating on the basis that there isn't access, right? There is plenty of, and I need to be very, very careful here. There is plenty of resources that are available. Sometimes it's the lack of sufficient awareness that those are available. And there is no shame. I always tell my friends that there is no shame in asking for help if you don't know, especially when you're looking for opportunities, so that when your opportunity arrives, it finds you ready. Because the biggest injustice for anyone is to aspire and long for an opportunity, and when that opportunity arrives, you are not ready for it, because you may never get it again.
Exactly.
Sometimes life doesn't offer you second chances.
Very true, very true. Even when you're 40 or 50.
Exactly.
Just take a
Right?
chance.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. You've been quite consistent, a consistent advocate for accountability and transformation. What do you believe is the biggest misconception people have about modern political leadership?
That we are done.
Do you think?
That we are uncapping, and that we're all interested or driven by the desire to earn excessive salaries, and that we genuinely don't care about public service, which is a massive misconception. Because for many of us, and I speak confidently about this because I speak to my peers in different political parties, this comes at a great sacrifice, right? This comes at a great sacrifice to our families, to our friends, and sometimes even to our well-being. Because being in the public service, you have to have a very deep desire for that to last long in it, because it can be a thankless job. And every professional goes through that in their different careers, like in different shapes and form. Ours just happens in the public clear. But I know at least for myself and also some of my peers that I work with in the political space, that really anchored by the deep desire to see South Africa be the country that many of our elders fought so much for it to be, a country of equal opportunity, and to be a safe country, and to be one in which everyone has the strongest chance to live an economic and fulfilling life.
I'm leading on that. What is your legacy that you want to leave from more work in government?
Listen, for me, it would be, as I said earlier, getting South Africa to 100% internet connectivity. If we can get every South African, regardless whether they're in a township, in a formal settlement, in a village, being able to access the internet from the comfort of their home, at their fingertip, that would be my greatest legacy.
I'm going to come back to you on that one in like a few months' time, okay? We have a tradition on Word Magazine on our podcast, is we always ask our feature, is there any podcast or video or book or something that you regularly tap into that inspires you, something that you can recommend to us and to our readers?
Yeah, in terms of podcasts, I mean, I've been really enjoying DJ Fresh's podcast. It's called What a Week. It comes out once weekly, and he interviews different South Africans based on their journeys and also the developments of the week, and asks for their opinions on developing stories in that week. And I'll also watch snippets of other podcasts across. But I think if I were to pinpoint one that I've been watching recent weeks, would be DJ Fresh one. And in terms of a book, I mean, the last book I read this year was Siya Kolisi's autobiography, which I found, I think with Siya Kolisi's story on its own, and having followed the success of the Springboks, we know a lot about his story, but I think the book was vulnerable, even talking about his struggles, and I don't want to dramatize this, but with, drinking alcohol, the pressures of leadership and having a young family. But for me, the go-to book in moments of clarity and in moments of, just trying to center myself again is a book called The Artist's Way.
I'm busy with it. I was like halfway through.
I'm curious about your review of that book. I read it in 2007 at the recommendation of who recommended that book? I can't recall who recommended that book, but I was just starting my career in the DS research department, and there was a stage I was struggling with a writer's block, and that book really.
Did you follow every little thing you had to?
Most of it. I think sometimes the thing about manual prescriptions sometimes is you gotta pick what works for you, but you also have to challenge yourself to try others. But for me, what it helped me with is realizing that, true expression and authentic expression comes with being comfortable with your own vulnerability. And when you are that way, you unleash your creativity, you unleash your curiosity, and you unleash your ability to be imaginative. And I think for a lot of people who are in leadership positions that require finding solutions and being able to lead teams, we often, mistakenly depart from this position that we always have to be the strongest in the room, right? We always have to have the answers. We always have to be the ones bringing the solutions. But that shouldn't be the case. And that's why we have teams, because you can tap into other people's strengths and hold yourself accountable to your own standard, because sometimes, particularly for high performance individuals, whether you're an athlete or an executive in any role, the key thing is consistency, to keep holding yourself to the standard that you expect of yourself.
Yeah. No one.
I'm glad you're doing that.
I will come back to you on when I get to the end of it. And then lastly, just a fun question. If you could WhatsApp your 18-year-old self right now and give that 18-year-old some advice.
18 years old.
18 years old. Yeah, maybe just out of school, that age. What would you tell yourself? And maybe a message to others that I just...
Sure. I'd be like, bet on yourself more. Like, bet on yourself. That's the phase where you've got the freedom to try and be as courageous as you can be in chasing your dreams. Because at that stage, whatever happens, every setback, you'll still have an opportunity to recover from it, right? Because the older you get, you start having multiple considerations about why are you taking these decisions. I often look and say, hey, I've become more risk-averse now than I was, in my late teens and in my early 20s. And having that courage was useful for me in getting where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for engaging. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you're in for a treat with our next edition, because South African rugby icon turned business visionary Bob Skinstad will be our featured cover. From leading the Springboks to victory to champion innovation and entrepreneurship globally, Bob's story is one you won't want to miss. Subscribe now and stay tuned for edition 22, launching this October. See you there.